And then I share it from my okay, it should be there. Yep, it's now streaming.
And yay! We're live.
feel like you're feel like you're activity. All right.
All right. I'm sharing it as well.
Mm-hmm. Good afternoon, everyone. We're just busy here sharing our feed to our personal pages. We thank you for all for tuning in today for another episode of Life on Lockdown. We are serious about making sure that members at New Beginnings are doing all that they can to live their best life in the midst of all that's happening. Um, and so I brought on my good friend here, Gamal Alexander, to help us out with how do we manage our time effectively during this time. Now, I want to start up from the top and let everybody know that this does not serve as an indictment against people that feel like the best that they can do at this time is what they're doing
Absolutely.
right now. This is specifically for people that feel like they want to do more, or they want to, they feel like they want to do something more during this time, but they feel like they're lacking some productivity skills or productivity management. And so I thought it would be wise to bring in somebody that could help us with how to manage our time better while we are home, social distancing, not on the usual schedule that we have. And again, I want to say that if you're doing the best that you can right now and you feel like this is the best that you can do, then by all means continue on. But if there's anybody out there that wants to accomplish something or finish something or start something, I think that this is going to be really helpful for you to make that happen. I have with us
Absolutely.
today the Gamal Alexander, and I'm going to let him talk about why he's qualified to talk to us today about how to manage our time better. Thank you so much, Gamal, for taking time out of your day to
Listen,
speak.
thank you for having me.
Of course, of course.
This is awesome, and you are awesome. I am, I am a big supporter and fan, of course, of your ministry and everything that you do. Uh, and so you have, you've often inspired some of my productivity, just kind of helping me to pace myself and keep myself going. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And speaking of productivity, I have been blessed to accomplish to accomplish some milestones in my ministry and in my career. I, on the ministry side of things, I am a full-time pastor as well as a speaker, revivalist, so on and so forth. And so ministry keeps that portion of my plate full. And then on top of that, and alongside that, I am an author. I have so to date published 3 books, 2 devotionals, one preaching workbook.
Mm-hmm.
My emphasis now is communications. I have segued into personal branding, and what that means for you is if you are a coach, an entrepreneur, an executive, and you need in this age of social media to produce products that and presentations that will help people know who you are and what and give them a sense of the ideas that you cherish, and I help you to do that effectively. And so I'm working on another book right now that is a speaking workbook,
Okay.
as well as a devotional that I've finished, Peace 2.1. That's going to be a third in our series of devotionals, and and alongside that, there is a business conference that's coming up this Sunday, sponsored by Kingsborough Temple in Brooklyn. And myself, Governor Whiteman, and Kimo and Hines, we're going to be coming together and talking about how to see it, scale it, and say it. How to how to basically take your ideas and and develop them into a thriving, successful business.
Mm.
And so I've got a lot on my plate. I've got a lot on my plate, which speaks to your point because everything was going so smoothly, and then Corona happened.
Corona comes in.
then Corona happened, and so on one hand, uh, we are all feeling the stress of quarantine. And
Yes.
the goal of quarantine is not productivity. The goal of quarantine is preservation.
Survive. Yes.
You're trying not to get sick and die. Yeah, that's the goal of quarantine. And there are some who beat themselves up because they are not living their most productive lives. Don't. That's not fair to you because the circumstance is special. You are not on vacation in Bali. Yeah,
No.
you are in many cases trapped in your home, unable to leave without a mask. Um, some have been furloughed, some have been fired. There's some businesses that have shut down. Things are less than ideal, and so feel free to give yourself some grace. On the other hand, uh, time marches on, and the fact that we are unable to we're unable to enjoy our time as we usually do does not mean that we get that time back later on. And so that's the tricky part because whether a day is a good day or a bad day, once the day is gone, it's gone.
Mm.
And so if I have goals, which I do, and I'm sure those who are watching and those who attend your church and those who are part of your ministry and those who are part of my ministry, they have goals and they have dreams. And if you have goals and you have aspirations and you feel called, you wrestle with that because this is not, and these days are not ideal days. But on the other hand, once the days are gone, they're gone and you
Right.
never get them back, whether they're good days or bad days, sick days or well days. And so while we're living under conditions that are less than ideal, how do we still turn around and take steps, even if they are small steps, toward what we want to achieve? And what I've had to do is I've had to address what I believe are the five biggest productivity killers.
Five days.
In the five biggest productivity killers in my day. And in addressing those, I've found myself inching forward toward my goals. But I am grateful to be inching forward and not standing still.
So the
Uh,
goal then is to inch forward, not to necessarily
the
stand still.
goal is to inch forward as opposed to simply standing still. And if all you can do is stand still, then praise God, at least you're not going back. Uh, and so the goal is to inch forward instead of standing still. But even if all you can do is stand still, at least you're not going back. that's a win.
Good. So what are, let's go down the list of the top 5.
Let's go down the list.
Productivity killers.
All right. The top 5 productivity killers during quarantine and how to avoid them. All right. Okay. So for me, the first was I wasn't pacing myself. The first productivity killer was a lack of pacing. You can't run a marathon at a sprint's pace. It's just not practical. You can't run a marathon at a sprint's pace. And what I mean by that, the temptation is to believe that because I'm home, because there's no commute, because there's no office, because the schedule is different, that I now all of a sudden have more time and more energy, and I should run harder to make up for it. Somehow I am guilted into making up this imaginary difference. And the truth of the matter is there are many who are watching who are working harder now than they were before Corona. And I know it's hard to believe, it's hard to accept, but it's absolutely true. If you're not working harder now, look at your schedule. It's probably more packed.
Yes.
Everybody.
That's crazy. I was like, why am I working more now?
Yes.
Than I was before?
Yes. Because everybody expects you to be on Zoom. After all, you're home. Everybody expects you to be on the conference call. After all, you're home. Everybody expects an additional meeting or additional call because not only are you home, but the assumption is the needs have increased, right? So I need to hear from you more.
Yeah.
I need to connect with you more. I need to deepen this connection. And so there's Zoom birthday parties and Zoom meetings and Zoom happy hours and and Zoom revivals. And we're all zoomed out.
Zoomed out.
You can spend 8 hours a day plus in front of this screen. And then you can log off of this screen and there's still the Facebook screen and there's still the Instagram screen and there's still the Twitter screen. And of course, you want to stay informed. And so you might log on to the news, but that's a circus, a very stressful circus at that. Regardless of what side of the political aisle you're on, you can agree that things are not ideal at the White House. And the news coming out of Fox or CNN or MSNBC or wherever you're watching is not comforting, to say the least.
Yeah.
And so from the rising of the sun to the going down of the same, you can find yourself running. You can hit the ground running. You can keep running. And you can pretty much pass out from exhaustion at the end of the day, get up and do it all over again. And you can't run that marathon at a sprint's pace. You'll burn yourself out. I have no quantitative evidence to support this. This is just purely anecdotal, but I believe that there are more people suffering from burnout during quarantine than are letting on. It's a productivity killer because if you burn yourself out, then you'll be in no shape to carry the burdens later on.
I love it.
Right.
So killer number 1 is not pacing yourself. Essentially
not
what you're
pacing
saying,
yourself.
We are allowed to say no to some Zoom meetings if need be.
You have to say no. We'll get a little more into that later on. But here's how I have practically negotiated this tension. I still try to maintain some semblance of a schedule.
Okay.
And so when I wake up, I know that I could check emails and I could jump on a conference call and I can conference call myself to death from morning till night. But at some point, I need to schedule some quiet time. At some point, I'm scheduling some exercise. At some point, I am going to sit for 30 seconds and do nothing. Yeah. A big part of pacing myself for me has even been mindfulness. Don't let that word scare you. It can be as simple as breathing in for 4, holding it for a count of 8, and exhaling for a count of 7. Doing that 5 times until I feel myself settle down. Learning that everything doesn't need to be done right now. Yeah, everything doesn't need to be done right now. I can leave the laundry for later, or I can reschedule the meeting for later.
Yeah.
Everything doesn't need to be done right now.
I love it. So killer number 1.
Don't pace yourself. That'll kill your productivity.
That'll kill your product, not pacing yourself. Okay.
Absolutely.
What's the second one?
The second killer is you don't make yourself a priority. You don't make you a priority. That'll kill your productivity beyond resuscitation. You will never be productive if you don't make yourself a priority. And of course, when you kill something, by definition, is beyond resuscitation. But you get my point. You got to make you a priority. You got to put yourself first. During this season, it's easy to feel guilty for taking care of you because there are so many others that are worse off than you. And so if I'm living in a house that has a bathroom full of toilet paper, a fridge full of food, my lights are on, my internet is strong, and I'm saddled with a bunch of first world problems, then the temptation is to ignore your wants, needs, desires, because you feel guilty for feeling them in the first place. And what I discovered is that I can only love my neighbor as I love myself.
Right.
And inherent in Jesus' command is a metric. As to the extent that you love yourself, love your neighbor. There's the narcissist that really loves himself. And so to the extent that you love yourself, why don't you look into loving your neighbor? But there is also the masochist that really hates themselves. Well, by extension, do you then really hate your neighbor? And if that is the case, we need to do some internal work to fix that. And so I had to learn to allow myself some guilt-free time, a few guilt-free cookies, some guilt-free Netflix. All of that factors into productivity. So I know I'm not talking about writing 500 words a day. And I know I'm not talking about burning the midnight oil and burning the candle at both ends. But if you're going to write, and my goal is 1,000 words a day. Okay? And so I am right there with you. But if you're going to write 1,000 words a day, you're also going to need to watch a little Ozark.
Correct.
All right. There's got to be a balance. And when you feel yourself coming to the edge of sanity because you've been writing 1,000 words a day, you've got to be self-aware enough to push the computer back, to log off, and to go for a walk, because you've got to make yourself a priority. You can't just, you can't simply gain weight and wallow in depression. Because you will not feel good and you will not be of use to anybody who wants you to log in. You know, and so if I'm mad before the conference call, that's an indication that I've had a little too much, And I need to make myself a priority. I need to exercise, not to save the world, but for me. I may need a salad, not to save the world, but for me. I may need to go outside on my front porch and get some sun, not to save the world, but for me. I may need to go to sleep, not to save the world, but for me. I may need to read a good book. I may need to check in with a friend who doesn't want anything from me, who simply wants to check on me. A lot of our connections are not really casual connections, but they're work connections.
My
Right?
Lord.
And so you're connected with people all day, but everyone you're connected with is asking you, what can you do for me? That's not a healthy connection. It can't be. Of course, you got to work. Of course, you got to check in with people. Of course, you got a boss. Of course, you got members. Of course, you got business partners. But you also need friends. Okay? Make you a priority.
I love it. Those of you that are just tuning in, we are talking about the top 5 productivity killers that we need to avoid. Those of us that are doing our best to be productive, even if it's incrementally, even if it's just a little bit productive. Pastor Gamal is sharing with us what he's learning as he's trying to write this book during this quarantine, and he's letting us in on what has proven to be a productivity killer for him. The first one that we talked about was not pacing yourself will kill your productivity. And we just talked about the importance of self-care being an important part of, if you don't take care of yourself, that is a productivity killer.
Absolutely.
If you wouldn't mind just putting in the comments some self-care things that you've been doing. Let's have a quick dialogue as we go on to the third thing. As they're writing those in, though, Gamal, what you're speaking of is so true. I just had a salad today as a means of giving myself some energy.
Be kind to yourself.
Right. And the idea of having friends that don't want anything from you, because it's so true. Like, my phone has been ringing off the hook more now, but it usually is connected to somebody wanting something. So I think it's really, really important. Yeah, it's really, really important to make sure that you have people in your corner that don't want nothing. They just want to check up on you and see how you're doing.
So for many of us, the extent of our interaction is with people who are always looking to add an adverb to our verb. Yeah, and what I mean by that, check yourself and see if you are surrounded by people who want to add an adverb to your verb. Work, verb, harder, adverb. Produce, verb, faster, adverb. And if you're surrounded by people who are always trying to add an adverb to your verb, then you need connections that allow you to be instead of do.
I love it. I love it.
You need more of those.
That's my takeaway for today. Okay, what's the third one? Third productivity killer.
I had to learn to pace myself. I had to learn to make myself a priority. And then I had to stop paying attention to the critics. That was the third productivity killer for me, paying attention to the critics. All right. So now when we think critic, we tend to think outside, and there are plenty of those. We just touched on that. Those people in our lives who are always adding an adverb to our verb. Okay. They always want you to do something more. You are never good enough. Okay. You will, and there are people in our lives who have no practical metric for success. Okay. There are people in our lives who will never approach you because they have no practical measuring stick. They'll never approach you and say, Kimberly, Pastor Bulgin, you've done enough. Thank you. Because in their heads, they have no measuring stick. There is no metric that allows them to determine when you've done enough. Right? You can always do more. What are you doing anyway? You're home all day. You can be calling me. You can be talking to me. You can be counseling me. You can be recording a video for me. You can be studying with me. You can be praying with me. Check that suffix with me. Right? It's and so it's because they have no practical metric for your success, and they're always trying to add an adverb to your verb, they will push you to the brink of insanity. And and when they use you up because you are disposable to them, what do you do with a paper towel, a sponge, toilet paper, anything that you use and use up? When you're finished using it up, you throw it away because you can get another one. Yeah.
Wow.
And so don't allow criticism from the outside to crush you. Because these people often have no practical metric for your success. As far as they're concerned, you can always be doing something more. You can always be a little bit more engaged. You can always be a little bit more productive, but they don't have a heaven to give you or a hell to save you from. Okay, you have got to learn. You and I have to learn, and not only the critics on the outside don't matter, but the one on the inside.
Yeah.
The one on the inside, because criticism comes from both directions, does it not?
Yeah.
It can come from the peanut gallery, right? But then it can come from your own perception.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
sometimes the peanut gallery inside my head is the most destructive. We have these unrealistic expectations for ourselves in the best of circumstances. And so instead of writing 1,000 words a day, because I'm Superman, I can write a book in a week.
Not so much.
I don't know. Are you sure? Sure, I'm going to exercise every day, especially when we're living less than our potential, when we're living beneath our potential. Oftentimes we want to make that jump from nothing to everything. And so there's no balance. And so I'm going to go from couch potato to workout warrior. And I'm going to do that starting Monday. And when we fall short, as we inevitably will,
yes,
then we snap back to the original extreme of I'm not going to do anything because all is vanity. Well, not so fast. How about we calm the critics on the inside and ignore the critics on the outside? I'll calm the critics on the inside, ignore the critics on the outside, and learn how learn how to affirm yourself. I believe the 6 most powerful words in the English language are His grace is sufficient for me.
Come on, sir.
Okay. 6 most powerful words in the English language. His grace is sufficient for me. I'm not perfect, but His grace is sufficient for me. I didn't get it all accomplished, but His grace is sufficient for me. That is the most powerful answer to the enemy outside and the enemy within. I have fallen short, and you can point out all of my flaws. And yes, there are clothes in the hamper. And yes, the lawn is a little high, and I know I should have cut it. And yes, I'm a little softer around the middle now because the quarantine snacks have kind of gotten to me. But you know what? His grace is sufficient for me. And yes, I haven't redone my resume, and I haven't had interviews lined up all day. I know I've lost my job, and I know I got bills to pay. But His grace is sufficient for me. If His grace is enough, why don't you help yourself to some of it?
Yeah.
And so the calming the critics on the inside and ignoring the critics on the outside. Even if sometimes they have good things to say. Sometimes you just don't need to hear it just then. So learn how to put that on the back burner anyway.
So you're basically saying it's okay to manage what's coming in. It's okay to minimize voices, expectations, all of that for the sake of making sure that you're not paying too much attention to the critics.
So here's a great analogy. I've got a speaker just to the right, connected to my iTunes. If it's bad music, I can turn it off. If it's good music, I can turn it down. Okay. If it's bad music, I can turn it off. If it's good music, I can turn it down. I can turn it up. I can regulate the volume. Okay. And so you are in control of the volume setting in your head.
Take notes of that, folks. You are in control.
You are in control of the volume setting in your head. You are in control of the playlist in your head. And so if you don't like what's playing, you can hit pause. You can turn the channel. You can hit stop. And even if it's good music, but you don't feel like hearing it right now, or you don't feel like hearing it at that volume right now, you are in control of the volume settings in your head. You are in control of the playlist in your head. You are in control. Do not surrender that control, especially to the critics.
Especially.
Yeah.
This is good. This is good. Brothers and sisters, we're talking about top 5 productivity killers that we need to avoid, especially in times of difficulty. And so far it has been rich. We have 2 more. The first one was lack of pacing. If you're not pacing yourself, it's a killer. The next one was don't make yourself a priority. If you're not taking care of yourself, that's definitely going to kill your productivity. And then we talked about stop paying attention to the critics. Turn down the volume or turn off the volume of the critics in your head. So important. What is the 4th productivity killer?
And so the 4th productivity killer that I have found is I wasn't patting myself on the back. I wasn't patting myself on the back. So now we've turned down the music. We've turned off the bad music. But how about affirming myself with some praise? It's one thing to avoid criticism. Negativity abounds.
Yeah.
But just because I abstain from bad food doesn't mean that I don't still need good food to survive. Okay. And so it's because I'm not eating fried chicken and French fries every day doesn't mean that I fast and starve. I was talking to another pastor just this morning, and the pastor shared with me that it's interesting how our default, especially as those who lead, those who train, those who serve, are the default of those we serve is a lack of affirmation. It is, of course, in a capitalist society, we pay you. And so if I pay you, you're an employee, and your appreciation is in your wage.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so why should I say thanks, to paraphrase the song, for the things you have done for me? Things that I deserve that you do to prove your love for me.
Right.
That, however, can be detrimental. And so rather than relying on the outside for affirmation, I have had to look on the inside. I've had to come to the uncomfortable conclusion that many of those I serve in many capacities, I'm not just talking about the pastor, I'm talking about coaching and ghostwriting and copywriting and branding and chaplaincy, all the irons I have in the fire, even our familiar relationships, our parents, our siblings, our children. I've had to come to the uncomfortable conclusion that very few of them will consistently say thank you. Very few of them will consistently cheer you on. I believe finding a cheerleader is a gift, it's gold. But if you don't have one, you're going to need to encourage yourself.
Yeah.
And there is great value in looking in the mirror, uh, especially in the face of setbacks, and reminding yourself that not only are you doing the best you can, but you're doing a really good job.
Yeah, encouraging yourself. I think within the body of Christ, encouraging yourself, boosting yourself, giving yourself a high five. You know, sometimes I feel
Absolutely.
feel like it's a problem, because how does that reconcile with God and him being the one that should be affirming us? You know what I'm talking about? I think sometimes we minimize talking about ourselves, because
correct.
Wasn't there a song that said, Jesus first, yourself last, others?
Yes, yes. Jesus, others, yourself.
Yeah.
That's joy.
I got the joy,
That's joy.
That was the song. You know, you don't put yourself first. You don't talk, you know, it's
sure.
Others first, Jesus, and then you coming at the dead last.
I have a real problem with our impractical use of the Bible. I believe we interpret it and attempt to apply it in ways in which God did not mean it.
Yeah.
Very rarely will God take your lipstick and write encouragement to you on your bathroom mirror. That's not how it works. What's more likely is that God will speak to you through the pages of Scripture, and quite possibly through other godly people, and encourage you. What you do with that Scripture depends largely on you. You can repeat it to yourself, or you can choose to forget it because you didn't internalize it or take it seriously in the first place. There is a responsibility from which God does not absolve you. There is a responsibility in life from which God does not absolve you. This thing called Christianity is not mystical, nor is it superstitious. It operates within very often within the realm of human ingenuity. As a matter of fact, that's how we recognize miracles, because miracles are those breaks in patterns where God decides to step out of the human experience and influence it with supernatural power. But very often, God operates within the realm of the natural, and which means that he enables us and empowers us to read affirming things and remind ourselves of them.
I love it. I love that you said that God actually often works in the natural.
He works in the natural. This is why we recognize miracles. Miracles are God stepping out of the natural and influencing it with supernatural power. And we recognize miracles to be somewhat rare occurrences.
I love
it. But the everyday life is also influenced by the Bible, which means that you do have the responsibility once again to encourage yourself. It's okay. We're not advocating some sort of descent into narcissism. What we are advocating is, because no one else is prone to tell you, you're going to have to remind yourself that you are not. I want to use better words for this, especially I want to improve the quality of this phrase here. So you're not a piece of junk. That's what it is. You're not a piece of junk. Even if the circumstances surrounding you and the people surrounding you say that you are.
Praise God. I appreciate this. Brothers and sisters, if you are enjoying this, let me see some hearts. Let me see some affirmations in the comments. If you have any questions for Pastor Gamal as it relates to productivity and using your time wisely, please put them in the comments. We'd love to be able to answer them as best we can. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We have one more killer that we want to share with you. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments, and we'll do our best to answer. But if you've been enjoying this so far, let me know. I see the hearts. I see the thumbs up. Pastor Gabal, what is the last killer to our productivity?
The last productivity killer is you don't have a practical plan. Yeah. I realized that in order to be productive, I needed a practical plan. I wanted to emphasize the word practical as opposed to the word plan, because we know inherently that we need a plan. Okay? It's been drilled into our heads. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah.
So we know at the beginning of any task, the first thing we're going to do is plan. But is that plan practical? In other words, what I realized very quickly, coming into quarantine and having these goals, and wanting to accomplish whatever it is I set out to do, wanting to write, wanting to plan, wanting to launch this business, wanting to do webinars. As a matter of fact, I just remembered a webinar I'm doing with Keith Morris for Elders of Excellence on preaching next week, and I had completely forgotten about that. And so, with lots of irons in the fire, what I quickly realized was that I was expecting too much from too little. I was expecting too much from too little. There was just one of me with limited resources under quarantine with the stress of a pandemic. Okay. And I was expecting to move the world. Yeah, I was expecting way too much from too little. And so I had to go back and reassess these plans that I had for myself. Are they practical? And is what I am asking from myself reasonable? Okay. And I'm not talking about reasonable in comparison to some ideal that you saw or heard about.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about reasonable in the context of a reality that is not yours.
Yeah.
Reasonable expectations for Bobby Flay's kitchen are different than reasonable expectations for mine. Yeah, because he has skill, he has equipment, he has experience, he has ingredients. I have none of those things.
Okay.
And so, yes.
How do you manage like what's reasonable and practical for me right now and pushing myself?
Well,
like, how do you not stay in this place of like, well, this is the best that I can do right now, take it or leave it, versus there's more in store?
I would suggest three things. Okay. Three criteria to determining whether or not this plan is reasonable and I'm achieving balance. Okay. Number one, the progress is measurable. Okay. And so if I am inching forward, I'm still moving forward. But maybe because the circumstances are unique, I can't move forward at the same pace. That's okay. And so if my overall goal is to lose weight, then if I were not under quarantine, I could give myself a pound a week. Maybe because I'm under quarantine, I don't have access to the gym, and maybe a half a pound a week is a big win. Maybe a quarter pound a week is a big win. But you know what? It's still a win. And so long as the goals are measurable and I can see myself heading in the right direction, then I ought to celebrate myself for heading in the right direction.
I love it.
So now the goals are measurable. I can measure the progress, but the goals are also scalable. And so by scalable, I simply mean I can increase or decrease the size at will. Okay? Every week during a crisis will not be the same. Some weeks will be more stressful than others. Some weeks will be more frustrating than others. Some weeks you'll feel more lonely than others. Some weeks you'll battle depression more than you will others. Some weeks you're going to get bad news. Somebody close to you may die. Somebody close to you may get sick. Somebody close to you may frustrate you. There are people who are experiencing conflict under quarantine right now because you're with a spouse, you're with children, and it's not even that you don't love them. It's just that you're in the same confined space for days at a time, and y'all just need some air. Okay, every week isn't gonna be a good week, so is your goal not only measurable,
realistic,
where you can ascertain whether or not you're moving forward, but is your goal scalable? Can you expand the parameters of your goal in those weeks when you're feeling great? Can you shrink the parameters of your goal in those weeks when you're feeling not so good? And so if the goal is measurable and the goal is scalable, and the goal is actually achievable, right? Is this thing realistic in the first place? Maybe I can't train for a triathlon right now.
Maybe not.
Right? So if I had access to a pool, then I could scale the goal. I could say, okay, well, not feeling good this week, I shrink it. Or I'm feeling great this week, I'm going to expand it. Maybe I can measure the goal. I can say, okay, I'm going 3 times a week. I can count all 3 times. I'm going 4 times a week. I went 1 time a week, but I can check off that 1 time. But we don't have access to a pool because of the restrictions. And so the goal is not doable.
There it is.
And so I'm going to have to take triathlon off the menu and replace it with a goal that's actually possible, is actually doable. Maybe the new goal is to finally read one of these books that have been on my shelf that I purchased and stuck up there and haven't had a chance to finish. Maybe that's a doable goal. And then on top of the ability to actually achieve the goal, I can scale the goal, because if I'm feeling tired, I can scale back and I can put it down. I can go to sleep. And if I just can't sleep, I can expand the goal and I can read a few more pages. And then, of course, it's measurable because I can actually count the chapters that I've read. I can see myself getting closer and closer to the end.
I love it. So all in all, don't be so hard on yourself.
Don't be so. In order to work hard, you can't be hard on yourself.
Yeah.
In a crisis, in order to work hard, you can't be hard on yourself. Right. You know, if you got to put that on a Post-it note, if you got to put it on your bathroom mirror, if you got to tie a string around your finger, whatever you got to do, in a crisis, in order to work hard, you can't be hard on yourself. You can't allow others' expectations to be hard on you either.
We really appreciate you taking the time to affirm us and to encourage us and challenge us to do the best that we can under the circumstances. And I think my biggest takeaway is that moving forward, even if it's a little bit, is still moving forward.
Yes.
And to be so hard on yourself if you don't come out with 10 chapters. If you come out with, you know, one
chapter is a win.
That is a win. Or if you come out with half a page or an outline, like whatever your incremental moving forward is
absolutely.
Okay. If you
I write when I feel like it.
Right. The end. Five. If you lose 5 pounds instead of the 10, that's fine. If you lose 2, you know, just don't be so hard on yourself during this time. And if you do absolutely nothing,
give yourself, his grace is sufficient for me.
Right. It is absolutely sufficient, because there's a lot of chatter on social media. You have the people that are going for it, and then you got the people that are just like, I'm out here just trying to survive.
Yeah.
There's room for both spaces.
Both are okay.
There's both room for both. So again, I want to thank you so much. If anybody has any questions, you can put it in the comments. Gamal, how can they get in contact with you if they want to speak with you more or get in on what don't you have a Facebook group that you're using?
So I've got I have a few ways in which you can get in contact with me. The first off is Facebook group 30 on purpose. Number 30, 30 on purpose. And what we're doing in that with that group is creating a community of people who are simply trying to survive during this crisis. They're trying to survive and thrive. And so we encourage each other, we hold each other accountable, we provide a place to vent. We simply pull people together and make sure they're okay.
Right.
So that's the first way which you can get in touch with me. Sometimes I go live in the group. Sometimes I post in the group. Sometimes I post videos in the group. Just trying to make sure that everybody's okay. The second way which you can get in contact with me is if you have a project. I just say it better now at gmail.com. Whatever you have to say, I help you say it better. And so you can remember, say it better now at gmail.com. That's my email address. It comes directly to my mobile device. Email me there. And if you can't remember any of that, go to the Kingsborough Seventh-day Adventist Church. Gracious people up there in Brooklyn, New York. That are sponsoring a one-day business seminar. See it, scale it, say it. And if you got one of these great ideas that you want to put into action, register. The registration is free 99. Okay, we couldn't do no better than that. Absolutely free. All you gotta do is click on the link, Google. You can Google Kingsborough SDA. It'll take you there, or you can follow me on Instagram at say it better, say it better now.
Yeah.
You'll see me right there on Instagram, Gamal T Alexander. You'll see that on Facebook. I accept everybody, and you're going to get a lot more of this from myself and two other people who are incredibly talented, gifted even, and we're going to help you get through this. That's what we're dedicated to doing. So a bunch of ways which you can reach me. Resources on my website, which is my name, GamalAlexander.com. I am here to help as much as I possibly can.
Love it. If you want to get in contact with him, guys, check it out. He has a lot of great resources for productivity, for helping us doing the best that we can. It really is a spiritual thing. This is not just, secular. This is about being good stewards of what Christ has given us.
Absolutely.
That we can get the word out, get the gospel out through as many different avenues as possible. So
absolutely,
let's do the best that we can while we're in this season. And I hope that you have found this to be helpful. Our next series will be next week. We'll be looking at entrepreneurship, which is kind of along the terms of what we were talking about today, but we're going to go do a deep dive into entrepreneurship for those that are interested in starting a business while on quarantine. We got something for you. And then tomorrow we have our Bible study right here at 7:00 Central Standard Time. We'll be finishing up The Heart of a Prayer Warrior. You don't want to miss it. I'm looking forward to getting into the Word of God yet again. We always have a good time during Bible study, so you don't want to miss it. And then we will see you again on Sabbath for our worship experience. So thank you all for tuning in. God bless you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
We appreciate you. God bless.
Thank you.